Hello, 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 and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge. I am the founder of Change Light, the creator of the Change Light system, where we're all about helping you feel more at peace and more empowered on the inside so that you can make an even bigger difference in the world. That's what the inner work and the greater good connection is, because when we feel better about ourselves and more at peace with ourselves, don't you think we're actually better human beings and better in the world? We have better relationships and we do better at work, et cetera, et cetera. Oh dear, I need to silence my phone. Do not disturb. So anyway, I'm so glad you're here. So I had an interesting run-in last night. I live in New York City and I was coming back from an event and I went to the bus station to head up Madison Avenue to go home. And I saw this woman who I recognized. And I knew her from sort of this other group that we're in. And we didn't necessarily know each other, but we'd seen her on Zoom. So I introduced myself. I said, oh, you're with, and she was like, wow. So then it turned out she was there with a friend of hers. And as usual, they asked me what I do. And I told them, I said, the Change Light system and my signature process is called the drawing out process. And that, it can permanently heal an inner child or an inner critic or what have you in 2 to 3 hours. And her friend was completely gobsmacked. She was like, how do you do that? And proceeded to tell me that she had done everything to heal her traumatized inner child. She had tried every technique and she rattled off a bunch of, techniques she tried or teachers she'd gone to or, approaches, et cetera. And she said, I've never been able to do that. And she was like, so how the heck do you do that? And I said, you know what, I hear you, because the inner child can be extremely stubborn, extremely demanding. And not only that, and I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes, there's often more than one. In fact, there's usually more than one inner child. So it's kind of a myth to say that, you've got to heal your inner child as though there's only one. In my experience, we actually have a lot. I have drawn out a lot of children inside of me. And I've had clients who've drawn out multiple inner children inside of them. And each time we take that child through the drawing out process, it permanently heals and fully heals. And that's the whole point. And so she couldn't believe that that's even possible. So it made me think, maybe these other people out there can't quite believe that either. Maybe you or others, have really tried hard to heal your inner child or heal your inner children. And you've dialogued and you've journaled and you've tried certain systems and techniques and stuff. And it's just never been enough, or it feels like, to use her words, a long slog. And so this was a woman who'd spent decades, in this long slog of trying to heal from her traumas, and especially to heal this inner child, or I would argue it's probably her inner children, from the abuse that she suffered and the traumas that they've been through. So without going into detail about my technique and how it actually fully heals. That's actually something that I keep it's a proprietary technique, so I keep it private. There are actually a lot of reasons why. You'll notice that even in these episodes, I talk about how I'm like, that I don't actually share the full drawing out process, but that you can take my free course, which introduces you to the first few steps of the drawing out process. Just as a side note, for whatever it's worth, the reason why I don't share the full process is because, frankly, it's a very intense process. It's more than just the steps itself. It's not like, oh, I just do step 1 and then this happens in step 2, this happens in step 3, and and it's all done. First of all, it's not necessarily that simple, because different parts need different kinds of attention, need different questions, they need different approaches. And so that's one thing. And that requires a trained, someone with, in my case, at this point, 13 years of experience doing this work. I developed it myself. And so I know intuitively, usually what questions to ask and what different types of parts need. So, but also because if I've had actually clients who've gone through the process and then they've tried taking other people through it. Other people have said, oh, it's this amazing thing you just did, and you say it's so great, and take me through it. And they've tried and it hasn't worked. And actually the results have not been so good, because then that person is open emotionally and bleeding out, if you will, like emotionally. And then my client, who, well-intentioned, was trying to take them through the process, wasn't able to do it because they didn't know what they were doing because they're not trained in it. And so far, I am the only person who's trained in this technique. So I'm just, for whatever it's worth, I just want you to know that that's why I don't say, well, here are the steps. Because it's actually really irresponsible to do that, because then people might be misled to believe that therefore they can do it on themselves, they can do it on other people, and it's just not appropriate. So anyway, just want to throw that in there. But nevertheless, in my free course in the community at changelight.world, you can actually take the first 3 steps and really experience lots of results. So that being said, let's talk about the inner child and why it is that, first of all, let me talk first about what causes a wounded inner child to form. Now, I use the term wounded because if you check back, if you've seen my old episodes, or if you check back on all the old episodes, you'll see that what most people call the hurt inner child or what have you. Those are what a type of X-power that I call woundeds. Okay, they're wounded, they're hurt, they're sad, they're crying, they feel powerless. They're sometimes stuck in a corner somewhere in the darkness, curled away from the world, or they're throwing a temper tantrum. But the bottom line is that most inner children, the vast majority, are what I call woundeds, because they are carrying the wounds, the hurts, the pains, the fears, the traumas, the confusion, the sadness, the memories of when we were hurt, of experiences that were in some way hurtful or wounding to us. And so what causes, first and foremost, what causes X powers to form, especially woundeds, is the belief that they're unsafe. So woundeds in some way or another feel unsafe being who they are. Let's say in this case, inner children, that a wounded inner child feels unsafe. That's why it's fallen into darkness, because it's realized that it's not being safe being itself, maybe safe not expressing itself the way it wants to, maybe safe in a physical sense. It's been actually physically, if you have suffered some kind of physical abuse, you guaranteed you have some inner woundeds that are carrying the memories and the fears and the sadness and the trauma of that abuse, being criticized. So in some way or another, when a part of us, and especially a childlike part of us, is led to feel that it is unsafe, then that is usually what we would call an inner child, or a wounded inner child. I mean, there's the joyful inner child, right? That's still happy and carefree. But when we're talking about healing an inner child, that's what we're talking about. And so with this inner child, being hurt or wounded or sad or scared, there are all kinds of ways that it can show up. And so it can be really angry and throwing a temper tantrum. It can be really confused and not sure what to do, or not understanding why it was treated that way. It can feel really sad and scared because it's afraid it'll get hurt again. Or it can also feel really neglected, like it never got the nurturing or the attention that it needed. And a lot of times it's, those kinds of neglected woundeds, is what I personally call them, is that they can end up, in the corner of a dark room in your subconscious. And sometimes you don't even know it's there. And sometimes it doesn't even know it's there. Like I've had inner children like that I would call neglecteds, that they're actually curled up in a ball. And then when we shine the light on them, when we bring them to the person's consciousness, and they suddenly say, wow, I thought I was a ghost. I wasn't even sure I existed. So that can be the depth of neglect that this child part of us can feel. And again, we can have multiple different inner children. So you can have one that's throwing a temper tantrum at the same time as you can have another one that's in that dark corner feeling really sad and scared, or at the same time as you have another one that's really confused about why that kid treated you that way, or that teacher said that to you, or your parents did that to you. And so we have multiple inner children inside of us. So that's something I want to make clear. So when we're talking about healing the inner child, well, you're not just talking about one inner child. There are a lot. But the truth is that yes, individually, these inner children can heal. So they fell into that darkness or into that state of sadness, confusion, fear, anger, whatever, because they were led to feel unsafe or unheard or neglected or what have you. And so the point is that is not their original state. So that's one reason why they can heal, because that's not actually their true essence. To be stuck in that place, that is not like their natural essence. That's not their truth. That's not who they started off life as. And that is certainly not what they're, necessarily destined to end life as, although many people do end their lives with their inner children still hurting and fearing. So the point is that just as they may be, we find them in darkness, if you will, but their true essence is light. And so it's simply a matter of bringing them back to light, back to life. So you're bringing them out of the dark and back into the light, which is what my drawing out process does, literally with drawing. As we actually tune in, we notice those parts, we draw them out. So by doing that, you're doing a lot of things, but one of them is you're actually bringing them out of the darkness into the light. Now that alone doesn't necessarily heal that inner child. It takes several more steps to fully heal that inner child. And it takes addressing that child's unique needs, fears, whatever's going on with that child. Maybe it has a story that it needs to share. Maybe it has multiple stories it needs to share, like get it off its chest, literally like unload and help it feel heard and validated. And so by drawing it, you're seeing it. That's a lot of times what an inner child needs and wants. So apparently, especially those, I realize I'm jumping around, but these are like tidbits, especially like an tantruming inner child. Usually one that's throwing a temper tantrum is like screaming for attention. And the problem is when we have that inner temper tantruming child, oftentimes we want to like shove it down. We want to push it aside because we don't want to feel that way, because we don't want to be the ones throwing the temper tantrum outwardly. And so we tend to shaft it, which makes it worse. But ultimately what it needs and what it wants is attention. I just had a session with a woman the other day in which her inner child showed up screaming bloody murder. She was so angry. She was stamping her feet. She was like this, which is really, really common. And what it turned out was she just wanted to be seen and heard and validated. And she wanted the woman to do what she wanted her to do, which was to do more creatively. And so, different inner children want and need different things, but this is what this one desperately wanted. So the point is that inner children, yes, they can permanently heal when they're seen, when they're heard, when they're validated, when their feelings are validated, when their experiences are validated. How often do I have clients who have gone through some kind of abusive situation, and yet the people around them denied it, gaslit them, acted like it didn't happen, dismissed their feelings, etc. That is deeply wounding to an inner child, to a part of us that's carrying those wounds. And so that will make it worse. And so validating that child's feelings and its experiences is huge, because a lot of times that's actually what has kept it stuck, is that it never had that. It never got that. So validation of feeling and stories, being able to share its truth, also being able to share its wisdom. So it's not just about that inner child, conveying its pain and like, well, I'm so upset about this, or like, I was so hurt in this way. It's also that child may have wisdom for you. And it's like, you need to hear me. So in terms of that other client that I had, where it had, she had that little girl who was screaming her head off with rage. It's like she had wisdom for the woman that the woman kept dismissing for a lot of, valid reasons in terms of what was going on in her life. But that inner child was like, no, you have to listen to me and you need to do what I am telling you to do, because this will be good for all of us, all of us internally and for you in your life. So that child had wisdom. So a lot of times the child has wisdom to share, that if we're not listening to that wisdom, then the child's going to keep being upset, or it's going to keep curling in a ball and saying, never mind, there's no point in me trying to get through to anybody. It's just hopeless and helpless and useless. So validating, hearing, also very, 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 very important. Remember what I said about that child, or that part that X-powers fall into darkness because they feel unsafe. So how can you actually help fully bring it back to light, back to life, by helping it feel safe? So seeing, hearing, validating, those are things that hugely help it feel safe, to say, I see you, I hear you, I get you. Yes, I understand why you're feeling that way. Gosh, yes, I remember that memory, or thank you for sharing. That validates that child, that part's experiences, its feelings. And so, excuse me, it helps it feel safe. So when you bring something back to safety, that is huge. That is the huge part of the healing process. And safety in connection with, so that's also what children, the little child and inner child really wants and needs, safety and connection, to feel safely connected with you or within the world, safe within the world. So a lot of times by the end of a drawing out process session, that child that's gone from throwing a temper tantrum or scared and like locked, feels locked in a windowless, doorless room, that's oftentimes how they'll show up, those neglecteds being the sort of extreme, is that by the end, they're hugging the person. There's this beautiful embrace with that person, or maybe it's with another part within the person, with the parent type that was originally very critical and has healed itself. So there's those types where you see that physical embrace, that connection, that safety that that child feels. But sometimes at the end of a drawing out process session, it's really sweet. What will happen is the child will be like, okay, I'm going to go play in the playground now. And there it is on the playground, like hanging from the, the person draws it like hanging from the, the monkey bars, or, jumping jump rope, or doing something fun and playful. And that's a form of safety too, because that indicates that that child feels safe to be free and joyful and playful again. You see, so those are expressions of safety and joy, and safe to even feel joyful, and safe to not have to feel that pain anymore. And so that leads me to another point that some inner children need. So we've got, let me just go back and say, so seen, heard, validated, safe, connected, so in safe connection with others also, and then also permission, something I was explaining to the woman on the bus who said, how do you heal an inner child? How do you do this? I've spent years trying to heal these inner children. I've spent all this money and I've tried all these techniques and nothing has completely worked, or they feel like these long slogs. How do you do this in 3 hours? Sometimes another thing that I find that needs to happen with some inner children is that they need permission to let go of that pain, or permission to release that behavior, or whatever it is that they've been holding on to. And here's why. Because sometimes they feel like, there are a lot of inner children that feel like, as long as I'm carrying this pain, then it will be a reminder to the person that I'm in that this happened to you and you don't want to risk this happening again. So they see it as, actually, in this interesting way, by carrying this pain, they see themselves as not just protecting themselves from that pain, but also protecting the person. And so in that case, it's almost like they see themselves as kind of doing a job. And so that job is, I'm holding on to this pain, and that is therefore protecting this person. But that's why it's okay. That's why it's often what my part of my role, and I sometimes will guide the person to do this as well, is to give them permission and to say, it's okay. You don't have to feel that way anymore. It's okay to let it go. And also, there are other steps that ultimately help that inner child understand that they don't have to keep carrying that they can be free to play, to be joyful, to have fun, to be creative, to connect, to hug, to do all the things that that child really desperately wants to do, but to do safely without getting hurt. So the question is, can you fully heal an inner child? And the answer is yes. And not only that, it can heal really, really quickly. That with my work, with the drawing out process, we heal inner children. I'm going to put it out there faster than anyone I know, honestly. And there are other techniques that can heal inner children pretty quickly. But, we can do it in a really, really powerful and really, really quick way without it being this long slog of constantly having to deal with the frustrations and the temper tantrums and the wounds and all that of that little child. So yes, it can. And yes, it can heal, I would say, faster than you can probably imagine. All right. I hope this has been helpful. As always, my name is Emily. I'm with Change Light. Please, 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 if you'd like to experience some of the drawing out process, please go to www.changelight.world. Sign up, take the free course, get in the free community, all that good stuff. And not only that, I have started a new thing in which I'm starting a podcast soon, featuring actual parts of recorded sessions of the drawing out process. So if you would like a free session of the drawing out process and you're willing to have it recorded and have me put excerpts of it on my podcast, keeping your, your last name and all that, anything, all that kind of stuff confidential, please do. Please sign up on my website on the podcast link on the tab. All right. I would love to talk to you, and I'd love for you to experience this magical work that I do for you to feel that yourself and feel that freedom. Maybe we work with an inner child. Maybe we work with something else. I don't know. I never know. It's always a big discovery and a fun investigation, and then a blissful transformation. So take care, and I will see you next week.